Hello, and thank you for listening to the Major Film Reviews podcast. The podcast you're about to hear contains strong language, major plot spoilers, and some very random ramblings. Most of the films you will hear about in the following podcast have reviews hosted at majorfilmreviews.com, where you'll find all of my reviews from the past 4 years, as well as links to buying my books on Amazon, or to buy me a coffee should you feel so inclined. Thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast. Podcast. I'm Nathan Major of Nathan Film Reviews, joined as ever by my co-host Angel Rulos. Say hello, Angel.
Hello, Angel. I think that's going to be a running joke now. I apologize.
I'm pretty sure you did that last month as well. I should have expected that.
Yeah.
So, we're still kind of sort of not really in lockdown here in the UK. The cinemas are still closed. But hopefully that'll be all changing soon. I know Cineworld, my local chain, that announced it was opening on the 10th, and then last week it changed that to the 31st. So it'll be next month at least before I get back to the cinemas. But we've still got some things to talk about today. I've got some of my reviews that I've done this past month to discuss some of the things I've written about. And we've also got our main topic of discussion for the day, which is Korean cinema. So I'm a recent convert to the cause of foreign cinema, I must admit. I went with Angel to go see Parasite way back in, it seemed like it was years ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't even remember when it was. It was that long ago. It's just, I remember it in sepia mode.
It was those glorious pre-COVID days where you could go to the cinema and sit wherever you liked and hug people and...
not be 2 meters apart. And I mean, I usually wear a mouth mask during flu season anyways because my immune system is not that great. But like now it's mandatory.
So
for me, I'm like, hey, I'm not the only one in the shop wearing a mouth mask, but been a while since I've been in a shop though.
I went on the buses, the local bus service today for the first time since last year. So obviously I wore a mask, it's mandatory now. And I managed to get the wrong bus twice.
Oh my goodness.
But that's probably not a story for the podcast. So to bring us up to speed, I wanted to see Parasite after I kind of saw the hullabaloo to do with the Oscars and how incredibly adorable Bong Joon-ho was at the Oscars ceremony. Just like all that man wanted to do was drink. Like he didn't care about all the Oscars. Obviously he was really flattered, and you could see that it all meant a lot to him. But like in all of his speeches, he mentioned drinking until the next day, and it just endeared me so much to him. And after watching Parasite with you, of course, I was amazed, as was everybody else who's seen it, at how good it was. And I wanted to kind of have a bit of a deeper dive into Korean cinema and see. And I've just kind of skimmed the top in the last few weeks. But Angel is a more seasoned Korean culture vet than I am, shall we say. A bit of a Korean connoisseur. Do you want to tell us about your love of Korean culture, Angel?
You mean completely and utterly embarrass myself and subject everyone to second-hand embarrassment? Okay, I'll do it.
Try and keep it PG, though.
Try and keep it PG.
Not too much thirst, please.
You're asking a lot. My first introduction to Korean culture was basically K-pop, and it was Wonder Girls on Jules Holland. So if this ever gets to Jules Holland, thank you. You've improved my life so much. I was just incredibly bored flicking through the channels, and then Jules Holland, it was one of the late night shows. These like 5 Korean goddesses walked on stage in amazing gold sequin what they're called, dresses. Oh my god, what is happening to my English? Goodbye English. This is how amazing they are. I can't speak.
You are a foreigner though, so we'll let you off.
I mean, I'm half a foreigner, thank you. I was born here. My mother is British.
Oh,
it's
yes, of course.
It's just my dad.
It's just,
blame it all on him.
Because Angel's got that sweet sweet EU passport that I'm going to marry him for one day.
No, I've
Just so I can
totally,
take advantage of your passport.
I currently have a British passport, but I
Damn.
kind of I do have my birth certificate and I've got my parents, well, my dad's and my grandparents' birth certificate, so I can get an Italian passport. It's just with everything that's going on with the whole transitioning thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I stand with getting an Italian passport because it's from what I understand, I thought the British way of transitioning, the whole 5 years being so fast and, we're totally rushed into everything, waiting 5 years. Italy apparently isn't as easy. So it's like, okay, perspective. I thought waiting 5 years to transition in the UK is going to be, long and hard, but
That's what she said.
yeah, that's exactly what Italy is saying. She's just like, really? Wow. So I'm still hoping to get an Italian passport, but I think I have to get just everything sorted out in the UK first and fully
Yeah.
transition, get my gender recognition certificate, if that is still a thing, because I don't know what's happening at all in regards to that because of the whole reform and
Yeah.
stuff.
It's
Anyway,
all incredibly difficult. So yeah, back to
but this
K-pop.
goes back to K-pop because K-pop is my form of escapism. It's just like everything that I don't want to experience in the world, I could just delve into K-pop and Korean film, TV shows, and forget the world. It doesn't exist. It's just K-dramas, K-films, K-music. So yeah, through Wonder Girls, I discovered Rain, who is he's still working. He's an actor. Well, predominantly he's a musician. He's a singer, but he's also an actor. So Ninja Assassin, I absolutely love that film. There's I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay, which I think is actually one of Bung's films. I need to double check that. I did write it down, and
It's
I don't
not.
know.
I don't think Bong Joon-ho's ever made a film called that before. Because I was having a look at his filmography the other day to see what else I could buy and watch. But strangely, like all of his earlier stuff, which I'm really interested in seeing, is really difficult to get hold of here. Like his later stuff is relatively easy because it's on streaming sites. But there's two films. There's Memories of Murder, which is like his breakthrough film, which is incredibly expensive to buy on a physical copy, and there's nowhere available on streams. And Barking Dogs Don't Bite, which is his first one, which is also not available on streams and really expensive. So, and this is another hurdle to foreign film for people like us who want to watch that kind of things. We found these hurdles of not being able to watch them through them not being available, essentially.
Yeah, and going down a rabbit hole of somewhat illegal sites that I don't recommend. But when
Just
you're
to be crystal clear, this
yeah,
podcast does not endorse illegal streaming.
no, which don't get arrested. It's not worth it. Don't do it. But
Support
when
creators,
you're
kids.
yeah, because when you're, I think at the time, when was this? This was like 2009. So I was just like, okay, so how do I actually watch this? Because it's not on YouTube. There isn't, I don't think Netflix even existed then. I think Netflix in 2009, I think it was Love Film or Love.
Yeah, I remember that. They used to like
Yeah,
post DVDs out to you to watch, then you'd send them back.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember
So
that.
I'm still from the days of when we got DVDs in the post. I think it was when they were transitioning from VHS to DVDs.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Blockbuster would have still been around at that time as well.
Yeah.
You know, you could have rented films and what have you.
Oh, Blockbusters. And then Woolworths. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digressed again. So yeah, through K-pop with Wonder Girls to Rain, because they were in the same label, that introduced me to Korean films. So there's I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. That is still one of my favorite films. and it's not Jun Bong-ho, it's Park Chan-wook who did the Revenge trilogy, and it's a completely different
The guy who
style of film.
directed Old Boy,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I have on Blu-ray that I still haven't watched yet. But he's Japanese, is he not? Because Old Boy's a Japanese film, I think.
Old Boy is a Japanese manga,
Uh-huh.
and it's just Park Chan-wook was just like, I really like this. I'm turning this into a film.
Right. And then Spike Lee turned it into a remake.
Yeah, which I saw, and I didn't hate it. Usually, I'm a bit like, oh my god, remakes. This is not going to go well at all. I'm one of those people.
It's a very strange choice
But
for Spike Lee as well.
yeah, but I didn't hate it. I was just like, this is interesting. And then Elizabeth Olsen, I really love her, and I was just like, this is an interesting take. This isn't.
And then your K-pop fandom eventually brought you around to BTS as well, who we won't discuss in depth, but anyone who follows Angel on social medias will know that BTS is a key.
Yeah. I have a Stan account, and then I've got my local account, and you keep tagging my Stan account, and I'm just like, please, let me keep the two worlds separate because I can't. I don't want to subject. I know.
I keep forgetting your other handle. So
yeah, but my handle is my actual name, though.
You know what to search for. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like, I am like, my identifier is BTS. That's how deep down that rabbit hole I am. My identifier is BTS. If you need to find me, just look for BTS.
I mean, you'd probably come across a lot of different accounts before you got to yours, to be fair.
Oh my goodness. How many are there? Yeah, no, there's with both names, there's with the both handles, there's a few variations. I think my mum my mum was on, she kind of is, but she isn't on Twitter as well. And it's just like, I know that's aimed for me, but that's not actually my app.
I didn't realize how many K-pop stans there were on Twitter until something trends and it just floods my. I mean, it's mainly because of you, because you retweet it all. But it's like every 2 weeks or so, my Twitter timeline will just be flooded with K-pop stuff.
Yeah.
Which I have no context for.
Yeah. All of a sudden, it's just like, why is this hashtag trending? And why is there K-pop attached to this? Because the last few days when I've been on Twitter, I'm trying to avoid it at the moment because it's not healthy. But the last time I went on it, Blue Lives Matter was trending, and it was trending in the K-pop section, and I'm just like, oh no, what have we done? What have we done? And then I'm just seeing pictures of like Smurfs and I can't remember. Is it Grover from Sesame Street and the Blue Men Group? And I'm like, oh, we've basically taken something and ran it into the ground again because we sent fan cams to a couple of police departments that were looking for evidence, and it was just like, no, you're just trying to criminalize people that are fighting for human rights.
I think
we broke that.
Did I read it right that a lot of K-pop stans bought tickets to a Trump rally, so it would be very poorly attended? Did I read that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. This is the power and influence of the K-pop stan in 2020.
Yeah. I mean, we're used to selling out stadiums, so why not sell out a Trump rally to, prevent people from dying? Because how many people were actually there that were already I think 13 members of Trump's team were already diagnosed with COVID-19 before that happened, and they went anyways. And that's his actual team. So it's just consider it, infection control.
I think the perfect vision of a Trump rally for me would just be one where Trump steps out on stage and there's nobody there. That would be hilarious in so many ways.
I actually feel that's really sad. I mean, not like in the sense of like a human being stepping out on an empty stage. I mean, there's that difference. I mean, I'm not saying Trump is a human. I'm not saying that he is. He isn't. Like, but it's just, yeah, that's.
Anyway,
How did he do
we seem
that?
to have
How
got
is Nick that a thing?
sidetracked again.
Again. Like.
For which I'm going to blame the K-pop stans.
I mean,
So
yeah,
it's kind of my fault as well.
I kind of mentioned it, but yeah. So it was basically a thing of I discovered Wonder Girls, who helped me discover Rain. I really got into Rain. I was just like, oh my god, he's acting. He's got a couple of films out. Oh, I really like this film. Let's see what Park Chan Wook has done. Oh, there's like the Revenge trilogy. What's that about? I found what's it called, Lady Vengeance in HMV, and I'm just like, oh my god, I really love her red eye makeup because My Chemical Romance, the red eyeshadow, eyeliner. I still love that style. I will recreate that style still to this day. And watched the film, fell in love. I was just like, I need to see more of this, and HMV kind of helped with that with the world section. And
there's quite a good world cinema section in the HMV in Hull. I got Mother from there. I did it from the website though, not from the actual shop. And Mother is one of the films we'll be talking about because I up till last year I wasn't all that much of a fan of foreign cinema, and I'd kind of justified this to a point of kind of, because language is such a complex and interesting thing that sometimes subtitles can't cover the context of what's being said.
yeah.
So when I was watching a foreign film, I always felt as if I was missing something. And the first one I went to go see and I really enjoyed, it was before Parasite, it was last year. It was a film called Pain and Glory by I can't pronounce his name. I think it's Pedro Almodovar, who was a Spanish director, and it starred Antonio Banderas, for which he was nominated for an Oscar for this year for his part in the film. And I really, really liked it. And it was in Spanish, but it was quite accessible. The subtitles were intrusive, and I thought maybe this is something that I can get into, but I just maybe need to get in on the ground floor, as it were. Maybe I don't want something that's kind of overly complex and layered to start off with, and that was a nice start. And then obviously we'd covered a few foreign films in uni. One that sticks out in my mind that really kind of reinforced my negative opinion of foreign films is a Hong Kong film called Chungking Express.
Oh god.
Which, as I understand it, is quite like well liked within film circles, but I thought it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. It had no plot at all. It had the speed of a glacier. It was, the subtitles seemed to make no sense in any context. I didn't like it at all. So it gave me that negative reinforcement for so long that I just needed to be watching the right films to be getting the right impression of it.
Yeah, it's quite an artistic film, and it's not your classical narration. Sorry, I'm currently doing my parametric narration essay this week, so I'm like, yeah, I have some terminology still stored in my brain. It's not all cobwebs. So yeah, the way that the story moves, it's like 3 different stories, and they're not even linked really. It's just
any creator who sacrifices audience investment for artistic license deserves neither.
It is one of those where you sit down because you want to watch art in motion and just escape all forms of reality and just escape all form of logic and sense and reason. You're just there because you're an art nerd, basically, which is kind of like one of the reasons why I kind of liked it. I didn't get it at all, but it's one of those things where I could just watch and be like, oh my god, that color grading. Ooh, wait, the thing that they did with the lights, that is pretty. And just not.
I mean, the artistic the artistic argument makes sense to a point. We kind of want to watch something good, but you also have to bear in mind when you're making a film that you're making it for an audience, and when
Yeah,
you
yeah. It's
when you start
visual
making
storytelling.
when you start making films more for yourself than for an audience, that's when you've got a problem, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
because this is not visual storytelling at all. This is visual art. There's that difference. It's not a film in the sense of it's a story. There's logic behind it. There's a plot. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. This was just a film,
It's a bit like
just in the loosest sense possible. It was
it's
just, it's essentially art, but in motion. It's just very.
it's a bit like La Jetée,
Oh
the
god,
old
that.
um,
Yeah.
really pretentious French art film that you can appreciate as a work of art, but it's not a work of entertainment. It would belong better in an art gallery than a cinema.
No,
In
this
my
is
opinion.
more for like if you want to study certain film techniques, then you go to Chunking Express. If you want to watch something that actually has a story, something that you can get emotionally involved in and like psychologically involved with, just no, don't. If you want background noise, Chunking Express.
So
It's
my admission on the ground floor was Pain and Glory, and that led kind of laboriously a few months down the line to going to see Parasite, which I was quite literally gobsmacked at. It was, despite being in a foreign language, it's the most immersed I'd been in a film in so long, so long. And after watching that, I kind of became a little bit obsessed with Bong Joon-ho, especially after I'd seen him at the Oscars and seen just like how endearing he was as a person, and like
when he
his.
was making the little statues kiss each
I
other,
know,
I keep seeing
so
gifs of
adorable.
that on my Stan account, and I'm just like, this is adorable. This is why I'm here.
See
I would too, to be honest. I'd be doing that if I was ever on that stage. I'd be like, oh my god, awards, kitty kitty. Like, no.
the thing about Bong Joon-ho's storytelling is there's a craftsmanship to it, and it's noticeable in Parasite and in Mother, which I'll get to a little later. But he crafts no plot thread he's ever put there like thoughtlessly. It's put there to then be connected to something else later on. It's like a big flow chart with different pins going in different places, and everything connects up so satisfyingly in the end.
I want to be a bit more poetic and be like, he doesn't just create a tapestry, he creates a bijou tapestry.
Yeah.
Like, everything is just, threaded together and it's just beautiful. Just like,
It's like
everything. Everything just ties in and it's like, like the fancy gift wrapping with like the really fancy bow and everything. And I like the films that I've seen of him so far, the themes are all pretty similar. It's about classism, and I'm just like, he has such a poetic way of saying fuck the bourgeois.
one of my favorite things about Parasite, and he kind of achieves the same thing with Mother, is that there was a twist kind of midway through, and this is going to include some spoilers. So if you haven't seen Parasite, then get to it. Pause this podcast, go watch Parasite, and come back. But basically, halfway through the film, the family who were kind of the poorer family discover that there was another family living under the house they were working, and the entire plot is flips onto its head. That they're now the ones with privilege.
Yeah.
And at that reveal, I just couldn't get over how masterfully it was orchestrated. It was conducted like a composer like weaves a symphony from his orchestra. It was the exact right time, at exactly the right pitch, and then kind of by the end, he switched it again by putting one of the family back in that position again underneath the house. It's master craftsmanship of a narrative.
Yeah, just the way it just like weaves in and out, and you're like, oh my god, can this get any worse? And then it kind of does, and you're just like, oh wait, so they didn't have it that bad. I mean, they had it bad, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't their level of bad, but it was still bad. But like,
it wasn't living.
Wait, it's getting worse.
It wasn't living in a secret compartment underneath someone's house. Bad.
Yeah.
And after watching that, I'd kind of spoken to you about different aspects of Korean film, and you
Yeah.
recommended Train to Busan, which I finally watched last. Is it Busan or Busan? Busan, is that right? Train to
Um,
Busan,
it-
Busan,
I'm
uh,
still learning. As far as I'm aware of, it's more Busan. It's kind of
Busan.
halfway between a B and a P, and
Right.
I've not mastered that yet.
So,
See, I love languages, so foreign films. I grew up on this. I grew up in Holland, so our TV was basically everything in its original, its native language, and then
yeah,
Dutch subtitles. So I'm used to this. I also grew up deaf, which I mentioned last
yeah.
time.
The
So
I'm gonna
yeah.
put a little apology here that I'm going to attempt to say some Korean names. So uh,
Mm,
I'm now going to apologize for absolutely butchering these names, but I'm trying my best. I promise. So Train to Busan is directed by Yon Sang Ho.
mm,
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. Yong Sang Ho. At first glance, when you first told me about it, I was skeptical, as I always am when I hear of a new zombie film, zombie TV series. Everything basically seems to be made with zombies, and it gets on my nerves a little bit. But I kind of found myself intrigued by this one. It's a novel concept. It's essentially a virus spreads throughout the population, and doesn't that sound familiar?
yeah.
And there's a certain strand of this virus gets trapped on a train heading from, I think it's Seoul, isn't it, to Busan, or
Yeah.
some Korean city to Busan, and they have to contain the virus within this train, but the infection spread so rapidly. That was just something I really liked about it, was how quickly they went from like being bitten to being these zombie creatures,
Mm,
because it all just seemed to kind of just pulse and just grow so quickly. But
yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I Subtitling it being in a foreign film wasn't intrusive to it at all. It was so accessible, and the acting was. It actually has probably one of my favorite child actor performances in it. It's
Yeah.
from Kim Suan, who actually plays a character called Suan, who's the
Mm,
daughter in the film. She's really convincing. She has a lot of layers to her. She's kind of wanting more attention from her father. She doesn't think her father's a very good person, but he kind of
mm.
goes over an arc. It's a bit of a sad film towards the end, actually.
It's
Uh,
heartbreaking.
it is, and I wasn't expecting it at all. Like I was expecting the typical kind of the heroes come through the end like
Yeah.
strongly, but it's like
Mm,
they don't kind of run over the finish line; they kind of limp over it, and it was really refreshing.
yeah. I'm just that. Oh, I'm actually getting emotional just like recalling that sort of that scene with the dad.
That's
Like
beautifully shot as well. Like
so beautiful because
how
it's
his shadow like falls from the
yeah,
trains. Yeah,
yeah, not trying to give too many spoilers away, but there is a very heartbreaking end, but the way that it's
yeah.
shot, you don't directly see it happening. Your imagination is allowed to sort of take over, which I absolutely love it when films do that, where you sort of see something, but you don't directly view it. You have to basically use your imagination, and that allows your emotions to come into play as well, or at least it does for me. And it's just again with the color grading, the colors that they use, like how they changed that color palette. It was just beautiful, but soul destroying and heartbreaking, and like it's. I think one way of putting it, I think that's what they were trying to do in Titanic with Rose, where it was just like, Jack, don't go, don't leave me. That's what they were attempting and failed at. Like, just they totally failed at that. Whereas with Train to Busan, where it's just like, no, no, don't go, please, don't go, don't. Okay, he went.
There's
Mm,
so the another good thing about it is how it subtly kind of introduces different arcs. So it kind of brings
yeah,
three different stories on this train, and then brings them all together to a conclusion by the end, which was
yeah,
really nice little bit of completionism
yeah.
storytelling. to show us these different angles to what was going on.
And there's like different sort of versions of sacrifices, especially with like paternal sacrifices.
Yeah.
Another spoiler alert, there's two dads throughout the film, and they both make really like the sacrifices they make for their family to survive, and it's just like, this is what manhood is, this is what fatherhood is, and it's just like, but also maybe don't die. And
So
it's just,
as you said, there's two fathers. One of them's played
mm-hmm.
by Gong Yu, which is the kind of businessman father, and the other one is Ma Dong-seok, who is also known as Don Lee. He's been in a few Western films as well, so he has a kind of Westernized name and a Korean name that I've found. But for the purposes of this film, I'm going to go with Ma Dong-seok because I think it's best to refer to people by their actual name rather than a shortened version. I find as a general rule.
Oh, because I've got the information that he was born as Lee Dong-seok, so Lee would be his family name.
Yeah, I've I read he's
name.
an American Korean citizen. Yeah, I got Ma Dong-seok, but yeah.
This is the thing where it gets, for me, and a lot of people with Korean names, it's the family name first, and then their first name, but the first name is usually 2 syllables. So the whole name is 3 syllables. And it's always just, I know when I was first learning Korean, I'm just like, wait, which syllable is like the family name, and which of the other 2 syllables are their actual name? And because when it gets translated to like a westernized view, because it's with his name being Dong-seok, it's like, okay, so is it Dong-seok Lee, or is his name actually Lee and then Dong-seok? Like, which one's the surname and then the first name? So this is why I find languages so fascinating, because it's just like, okay, let's figure this out, let's get into it.
There's something really interesting about a language being impenetrable to outsiders, because like from an outside perspective, the English language is probably one of the most difficult in the whole world because of how many like words we have that are the same word but have multiple different meanings.
Like wind and wind.
Yeah.
I still cannot forgive the English language for Worcestershire. It's not exactly English either, because it's it's like a combination of different languages, predominantly like Germanic and French and Latin.
Well, but basically the explanation for this is English isn't one language; it's 3 languages wearing a long trench coat.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I can actually see that. I can envision that. I love it.
There's a sequel out this year to Train to Busan as well. It's a standalone sequel.
Yeah,
it was doing the
direct one.
No, it was doing the festival rounds before everything closed down. So it'll be due out soon. It's called Peninsula.
Yeah.
It's, as you say, it's not a direct sequel. It's a standalone one set in the same world.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward. So I think it's got the same director as well, which is always nice.
Yeah, there's theories about one of the girls being the daughter. I've forgotten her name already. I've got a picture of her in front of me.
Suan.
Suan. Yeah, apparently one of the girls that you see in the trailer is Suan, and I'm just like, ooh, let's find out. Let's find out.
Yeah. As obviously you recommended Train to Busan to me after seeing Parasite, and it kind of is. It feels to me like a kind of beginner's film for anyone who's not too familiar with Korean films or foreign films in general, because it feels accessible to the layperson.
Yeah.
So, but there is a kind of, with any different nationalities films, you'll find a kind of layer of cultural difference, which is more apparent in Mother, I think, than in Train to Busan. But there is a kind of layer of what Western culture might think is weird or odd, but will probably be quite normal to a Korean culture. Obviously, me not knowing much about Korean culture, I'm kind of giving it a little bit of leeway because I don't know what constitutes being acceptable in Korean culture and what constitutes as a difference exactly.
Yeah, yeah, because there's different forms of like showing respect, for example.
Yeah,
Kind of reminds me of an article I read about Parasite, where someone was like, "Oh my God, like the way that the director just did this scene in the car, where like the driver was on one side, but then the camera and was like parallel to how the person in the back is," and I'm like, that's not an artistic choice. That's not a director thing. That's literally Korean culture. Because I can't remember the dad's name. Oh my God, I'm so terrible with names. I apologize. But the rich dad was
hmm
sat in the back seat on the which side is it? The driver's
passenger
side?
side.
Yeah, the driver's side. You know, the driver's in the driver's side, you're right.
hmm
But the sort of like the seat of honor essentially in a
hmm
car is the back seat on the passenger side.
Yeah,
That's like
because they don't like to sit behind the person driving. So something to
yeah.
do with that, isn't it? Yeah.
Whereas for our culture, like you call shotgun, you're in the
Yeah.
passenger side at the front. Whereas with Korean culture, passenger side at the back.
hmm
That's where, the person, the man, like that's where you go. That's your mother-in-law or whoever's like, the household, the important person.
hmm
They go there. And this article was just like, oh my God, this is like such a great artistic choice. And it's like if you just maybe Googled it or watched other Korean dramas and films, you'd see that that's a very common thing for a person, especially a high status person, to sit at that side in the back.
I noticed a lot of kind of Japanese influence on it as well, especially in the body horror department. There's a
Mm,
lot of similarities between the transformations between human and zombie with Japanese body horror.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
I
thinking
think
kind of The Ring and things like that.
yeah.
But,
The history between Korea and Japan is
yeah, Japan used to
that's
be. Was it Japan used to be the imperial power in Korea, or Korea was the
mm,
imperial power in Japan? I think it's
no
Japan were the power in
Japan.
Korea, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and the history behind that is heartbreaking, and
Yeah.
it's not something that book unfortunately still hasn't been closed to this
I mean,
day.
to be
And
fair, we learnt about this at
yeah,
uni when we were doing a module on film, nation, and identity, which is looking at different nations' identity through film. And the things that fascinated me most was learning about the history of relationships between countries, especially with
mhm,
Japan and Korea. Uh,
yeah,
because I think it was just after the Second World War, but before the Korean War, Korea experienced a kind of a new raft of freedom that it never really experienced before, and it had a kind of first wave of films that included Madam Freedom, which was the film we watched at uni.
yeah,
That was 1954, I believe, and all of that changed when there was a kind of military coup in South Korea after the
mm,
Korean War, and the kind of the wounds are still very much open. In so
yeah,
what I understand, there's still quite a lot of antagonism towards the Japanese in Korea, and the other way around. To be fair, I know
yeah,
of a few examples in the world of sumo in Japan, where Korean sumo wrestlers would be deliberately held back for not being Japanese and for being Korean.
mm,
So it's really interesting to read upon on these relationships and how they relate to films.
yeah, because it's so deep within their culture. I mean, it is their culture, and with that history, how deeply it still affects people, it's just, it's
I
it's
mean,
very
yeah,
it's it's so deep
it,
and
um,
really heartbreaking, and that it's still affecting people to this day. I mean, one of the, for lack of better words, one of the unfortunate, lasting things. I am not going to be able to word this correctly at all, so my deepest apologies in advance. But one of the horrendous things about the whole Korea-Japanese conflict is with Japan. They used what they refer to as comfort women, and it's not as nice as it sounds at all.
I believe I think I've heard of this before.
Yeah, so these were women that they basically used and abused sexually, and Korea still has institutions essentially for the survivors. They're still alive, and they're still those wounds are still very much open. So there's still a lot of bridges that are trying to be mended, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, the closest that I can think of for us to try and understand it is how things are between like England and both Irelands, Northern and the Republic. Like everything that happened in like the 70s, the 80s, all the way up to even 2000s.
Yeah.
With everything that happened with us, with the bombings and everything, we're still trying to, come to terms with each other in a sense. We're still bridging our,
I mean, the thing people don't tend to realize with that is that it's not as ancient history as you think it is, and even more so between Britain and Ireland. But like as you said, there are still institutions that offer support to those comfort women now, which makes me think that it must have been it can't have been all that long ago if there's still. No. So if it's still a fresh memory in your mind, then it's going to cause a lot of trauma. In the same way that Japan has a really interesting history and how its kind of identity as a nation was bruised so much by the Second World War after they had to surrender. That kind of hurt the country's ego a lot.
Yeah. And we see that in their art, in their, the music, their films. That's one of the themes that you see in both Chan-wook and Bong's in their films, because it's something that's referred to as Han. I'm still learning exactly what it means, because Han in and of itself is such a complex sort of cultural. I don't know the English word for it. This is where my linguistics are like, I know it in Dutch. I can kind of explain it in Dutch, but what is it in English? But it's like this ideology. It's such a core part of Korea, and like as good as we get with Westerners trying to explain it, it gets glossed over as basically the grief and the struggle and the pain that one feels, and it's just like there's so much more to it than that. And it's one of those sort of concepts, ideologies, that's not that easy to explain and define. It kind of reminds me of trying to explain the word faith to a Dutch person. We don't have the word faith in Holland. We don't have that word in Dutch. So it's like, how do you explain something like faith? So I think for a white person to try and understand and explain what Han means, because it's so much more than struggle and pain and grief, because it's a generational thing as well, but also not. And it's very complex. And it's one thing that I definitely, if you want to learn anything about Korean culture, definitely try and find definitions for Han.
I think when it comes to the difference between European and Asian cultures seem to have a lot better grasp of coming to terms with their past than the Westerners do. Because I know that in Japan they saw it as quite important to kind of come to terms with what happened under their imperial regime. They're very, very careful as to what they do and say now. Is kind of the difference between Japan's attempts to remember its past and Germany's, because remember they were on the same side, was that Germany have kind of disassociated themselves and kind of, in a way, trying to pretend that it didn't exist and trying to move on from it. Whereas Japan have kind of conceded what they did wrong and have for a while been coming to terms with it.
So
And I think that's a good example of how Eastern culture works a lot differently to Western ones.
Whereas from a Dutch perspective, the way that I was taught about Second World War, that differed so greatly to how British people were taught about Second World War, and how each country views Germany in this situation is different. Because like from your point of view, like Germany just like glosses over it, but from growing up in Holland, we kind of saw it as, they're trying to make amends. They don't want to rub salt in the wound. So it's just like, we're deeply ashamed of what's happened. We're going to try and move on from this and not, not rock the boat and be like, hey, remember when we really fucked up on this? It's just yeah, we fucked up on this. Like, we're going to try and not do this again. We're going to try and just move on and grow for the better and try not to make the same mistakes.
I know that Germany's attempts to kind of move on come from a place of deep personal shame at what the country did.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, in terms of countries now, I think it's really important to think of Germany now as a completely different country to Germany then, because of how much has changed and how kind of deep the sense of shame in a way goes in Germany.
Like they don't condone any of its past actions. They're just like, that happened, that was absolutely awful. We're going to do everything we can to not do that again.
But when it comes to Eastern culture, they're kind of tenets of honor and things like that. That's where it comes into place with dealing with what happened in the past and coming to terms with it. Like, I've got a couple of Japanese films on my Prime Video to watch. I've got Seven Samurai and Tokyo Story, which are both apparently classics, which I've never seen. They're both Japanese films. But I'm really looking forward to it because it's something that I can never tire of learning of different countries' cultures by learning it through their films. That's the way that I kind of accumulate different cultures and come to know them.
I think, oh my god, Tokyo Story. It's been a while since I saw that, I think. If it's the one that I'm thinking of.
They're both available to rent on Prime Video for $1.99 each at the moment, so I took advantage of that while I could. They're also available on the BFI player in case anyone wants to listen to them. But moving on from Train to Busan, I then went and looked up another Bong Joon-ho film after watching Parasite. I have got Snowpiercer still to watch. I haven't watched that yet. But I watched Mother, which was a film from 2009, so just over 10 years ago. And have you seen Mother, Angel?
I haven't actually. I'm ashamed to admit I haven't watched that, but I have watched Snowpiercer, and I watched the American. Wait, because there's no
the TV series.
Yeah, that's the TV series. Thank you for translating. Because there's the American film, which, I mean, I say American film. It is Bong Joon-ho, but it's an American. It's a Hollywood film that he did.
It's a co-production between Korea and Hollywood. Yeah.
I want to say Luke Evans, but it's not Luke Evans.
Chris Evans.
That's the Evans. Thank you, Chris Evans. And it's just like, oh my god, what even? Just what? And the TV series, I don't know how I'm gonna cope with the TV series because like the film, like when I mentioned like the classism, like with Bong Joon-ho when he says "fuck the bourgeois," he means it. He says it with his entire chest, and he does it so poetically. Snowpiercer is just like, it's beautiful.
Has a really impressive cast as well. Like, it's a really good cast.
It's an international cast as well.
There's Chris Evans and John Hurt's in it. Ed Screen's in it.
I want to say Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton's in it as well. Yeah. Was great. But anyway, Mother from 2009, which is before Snowpiercer. It's about a mother, strangely enough, given its title, and she's a kind of a widow middle-aged woman living in a small Korean town, and she has a son who's got I think it's described as what's it called, developmental disabilities. I think it's phrased on the blurb. It's intelligence disability, or however it's phrased. And the basically he's a girl is murdered in this small town, and her son is accused, and she goes to out to prove his innocence, and like we as viewers are led to believe that he's innocent throughout most of the film. And then the big twist at the end, and again, big spoiler warning if you haven't watched it and want to, pause the podcast, go and watch the film, come back. But the big twist at the end is that we were all wrong and that her son actually was the killer. But she still gets her son freed and sends the wrong man to prison to protect her son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a great film. It's a great watch. It There were bits where I was kind of, especially when it comes to the son, like I think it was handled okay with the kind of learning disability angle. Some bits of it left me feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but again, I kind of put it down to cultural differences and a lot of it with artistic license, because he probably would have faced quite a lot of discrimination where he was. But it's an intriguing watch, certainly.
Okay, that's still on my list to watch. I just haven't
It's on
managed to get around to it
BFI
yet. I know
Player.
I'm on you with like Snowpiercer, where it's just like, how have you not watched Snowpiercer? And I'm just like, yeah, I haven't watched Mother yet. I should. I really should.
I'd actually bought it on Blu-ray, but then discovered it on BFI Player, and because I had a free trial to it, so I watched it on there the other night and thoroughly. Again, it's another example of how he kind of constructs a narrative to kind of lead, making you think one thing and then kind of keeping something hidden behind his back and revealing it when you least expect it. It's because the whole genius of the thing is like we're shown the event just before the girl is murdered, and like we're shown completely the wrong sequence of events to throw us off the scent.
Yeah, that seems to be a Korean thing where it's like you get shown, certain things happening, but it's like it's not everything that's happening.
Yeah.
You're only getting shown either one point of view or it's edited down.
And it's,
So
it's something
like
that's
yeah.
so rare to like Western eyes to see someone be brave enough to actually show the audience the wrong thing in order to show them the right thing later on, and it kind of he manages to pay off everything, even if it feels kind of weird or out of place at first. He will make it pay off in the end. Like
It's the thing where it's just like don't judge a book by its cover, and appearances can be misleading.
Yeah, and as you say, there's a lot of parables of class in Bong Joon-ho's films. In this one too, you kind of shown the way kind of different people live in Korea. The mother's in a low-paying job in a lot of debt, and she ends up being sued by some people because her son apparently broke some golf clubs they owned. It's obviously something that sticks in Bong Joon-ho's craw quite a lot, and something that he's constantly wanting to push back against, which is admirable in itself. And having heard the premise for Snowpiercer, I can see kind of where that influence will be in there as well.
Yeah. Have you watched Okja?
I haven't. I know it's on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I don't know whether it still is. I can probably have a look now.
It was last time I looked. I looked the other day because I've got it on my watch list to watch later. But as I say, that the really frustrating thing is the interesting films from earlier in his career that I really like the sound of are really difficult to get hold of.
Yeah.
Like his film Memories of Murder from earlier in his career is about like a real life murder case that was only just recently solved. And the whole thing sounds really intriguing, but to get a second-hand DVD or Blu-ray copy costs a couple of £100, and it's not available on any streaming sites at all, which is quite frustrating, especially in kind of the modern day and age where it seems like everything is available. Like touch of our fingers. When something you really want isn't there, it's twice as difficult to stomach when everything else is available.
Yeah, it was one of those things of like, right, who can I contact to try and buy this legally? And it's like, do I have any friends that has friends? And
then
it's
just to
like,
rub
okay,
salt,
no.
just to rub salt in the wounds,
Mm.
it was announced for a Criterion release, but it's an America only release, which just rubs salt in the wound even more, because I get Criterion Blu-rays all the time, and I would have absolutely snapped the hand off for that, but
sorry, but the K-pop stand within is just raging so much because like whenever K-pop groups like a few years ago were just like, we're doing a world tour, and it'd be like a lot of Asian countries and America. And I'm just like, how does like majority of like East Asian countries and America, like how is that a world tour? You're leaving out like the rest of Asia and like every other continent other than America.
But
like
if you
that's
take
not
away
well.
if you take away the East Asian side of that, then that's most Americans' entire worldview. It's just like just America.
There is that perspective, and it's so frustrating. Just like being a fan of all this, and then being like, okay, so how do we actually get this? And then, like I said, there's eBay, which can be so incredibly expensive, and then there's like K-pop shops online and Korean culture shops online. 10 years ago, when I first started getting into K-pop, it was basically you get what you're given on eBay. If you can't find it on eBay, it's basically downloading it illegally. Those were the only options. In the last, past few years, more shops are selling internationally. Other shops are opening that are either based in Seoul or, based throughout the world, and they'll sell things. They'll get it shipped in. There's things like Gmarket, and it's becoming more available, but there's still so much more to go.
I mean, kind of re-releasing things is a recurring thing these days. Like, Murder on DVD, and then basically what they do is they take what is already in circulation out of circulation, so that when they release the new special collector's edition or whatever they call it, then that's the only version you can buy. They can slightly mark it up more, knowing that you're going to pay for it to have it.
Yeah,
which is
because it's a special edition. They're like, oh well, it's a special edition, so we are going to put the prices up a bit, but we're also going to make it available to more countries. And it's like, it's great that we get to financially support this incredible art, but can it maybe be kind of affordable too, please? Thanks.
But this is where kind of independent streaming sites could really come into their own, because the services like Mubi and BFI Player that have a lot of foreign films in their libraries that they could make a lot more use of as being like the premier place to see foreign films in Western countries.
Yeah. The thing is, like, they can really capitalize on this, but I think there's a fear that because it's foreign, because it's international, there either isn't going to be a big enough audience.
Yeah.
And I've had that excuse thrown at me for the past, 2009, where it's just like, oh, people just aren't interested. I'm like, people are interested, you're just too scared. What exactly is it that you're scared of? Because there's the cost of everything. But it's like, if it's a streaming site, that will help minimize the cost to an extent. I mean, it's not going to be like the cheapest thing ever, but it's I think, especially with everything that's happening right now, moving things online, streaming international films online like Movie and Arte are doing, because I don't know much about the BFI website.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like online streaming, definitely, because the way that movie does things, oh my goodness. Oh, because they have a selection that's on. They only run it for a certain amount of times, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
so it is
they've
essentially an
got
online cinema.
they've got Portrait of a Lady on Fire on there at the moment, which is highly
Yeah,
recommended too.
yeah. So that's an online streaming service that acts essentially as a cinema because they do live streaming as well.
Yeah, and they do
And
kind of
it's just
Q&As
like,
with directors as well.
yeah, which I think if other cinemas were to follow that lead, we could, try and maybe survive what's going on a little bit better. It's not the answer at the moment, but I think if people, were dedicated enough, and it's just we need to move with what's working, but we kind of also need to make what can work actually work. It's both sides that need to put in effort.
I mean, the thing is with foreign and international film is it's
Mm.
always going to be a niche market, but
Mm.
there is still money to be made in a niche market
Yeah.
that you provide good service for, because then
Yeah.
if you're providing something that niche will want, that niche will spread, because
Yeah.
as it will spread via word of mouth, and people will wonder what other people see in this thing. It's like,
It's how the Nickelodeons did it. When
yeah,
they first started, people were just like, do we really want to be watching these like picture films? Is this really going to take off? When films first started off, with the Nickelodeons, they didn't think it was going to take off at all. And look where we are now.
I mean,
I think
I think
there's
they would.
also sorry, there's also like the othering of international foreign films as well,
Yeah,
where it's just like, oh, it's foreign. Why would people want to watch something in a foreign language? And it's like, why not?
the
I
it's just
remember
especially
in high.
prevalent in American and to a lesser extent British culture, is that most Americans are seen to just want American things, and it's a kind of slightly less of a way in Britain because most of our culture comes from America in the first place. But there is a kind of a school of thought, so to speak, that English speaking people only want English speaking things. Which,
Mm,
to be fair, I'm not denying that a lot of them won't. But I'm also going to go out on a limb and say that if they tried certain things in different languages, then they probably would enjoy it. It's
they
like
would.
as Bong Joon Ho said himself. I think it was at the Golden Globes or one of the awards. That if people can get over that kind of 1 inch high hurdle of subtitles, then they're opening themselves up to an entire world of cinema that they would otherwise miss.
I love that stuff. I love that. I just, oh, when I read that, I actually clapped. I was just like, yes, this is what I've been trying to say for years.
Because
Because
I'd
like
thought,
I've been trying to access, foreign media since I basically moved back here, and the amount of resistance that I've come across from so many different places and people, and it's just like people just aren't going to be interested. It's like, yes, they are, if you just give it a chance. If you say, if you tell people, what ways these foreign films are amazing, they will listen. Instead, it's, oh, but it's like it's in a foreign language, so like, there's that little con. It's just like, is it really that much of a con? But then I think that's also reflective of how I grew up being, in the community that I was,
mm,
in the country that I was, where it's just like everything's in its native tongue, everything's
you will only
subtitled. It
know
will.
you'll only know what people want and what they don't want if you provide it to them first.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't say people don't want this thing if you're not providing it for them and giving them the chance to not want it.
Mm.
It's like
I forgot that was
I thought
subtitled in general with cinemas,
I thought
which
after the Oscars that there was going to be, and I think it's struck really unlucky, especially with the pandemic and what have you. Because
Yeah.
I genuinely thought when the Oscars went on that it would kind of kickstart a more mainstream interest in international films and foreign films because of this high profile film that. If you noticed, after it had got all the awards buzz, it suddenly
Mm.
became a box office success everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and because of that exposure, I was expecting it to kind of go and trickle down, so to speak, to different
Mm.
films, and I thought it was going to start this whole new boom of not only Asian but all sorts of foreign cinemas. But
Yeah.
it couldn't have come at a worse time because actually speaking, I mentioned Portrait of a Lady on Fire a few minutes ago,
Mm.
and that was the last film I saw in cinema before they were closed down. I went to independent cinema to watch it, and
Mm.
and and that was actually a pretty full screening. Like
Mm.
I was expecting it because it was a French film to have like me and maybe one other person, but it was
Yeah.
surprisingly busy, and I think it's because of the mainstream attention that Parasite got that
Yeah.
it's had a knock on effect to other foreign films that people are now willing to give a chance to.
Yeah. And it's just if other films had that kind of attention as well, like the amount of films that we could actually enjoy, it's going to open so many doors, not just for filmmakers, but for the audiences as well. Because I know within my friend circle, we're all getting fed up of the same types of storyline. Like romantic comedies, we feel have gotten very stale. Action films have gotten very stale. Even zombie films kind of tend to get stale. Things go in cycles. And it's like if we open up our world to international films, there's so many different forms of storytelling because of different cultures. Like, what are the chances of us actually getting bored then?
It's not just that, but it's the experience of seeing this different culture that can help a lot
Mm.
of people accept more foreign culture. It can really help a widespread acceptance of different cultures
Yeah.
and beliefs if we're shown this as a kind of like, and it's not just foreign things. It's kind of there's different narratives that get kind of suppressed even in kind of regional British productions.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a lot of like Scottish films that go unnoticed, and films based in the north of England and things like that. And it's through seeing these things and through experiencing these cultures that people
Yeah.
begin to accept them, basically.
Like, yeah, because when I moved back to England, there was one particular soap that I started watching, and it was on, if I remember correctly, it was on S4C. It's
That's the
a
Welsh one,
Welsh.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember it was like the Welsh Emmerdale, and it had I always get his name wrong. Is it Owen Griffith?
Yeah.
He was in Fantastic Four. He's also in Glee. I've been watching Glee. Oh, I watched Quarterback today, so I'm still quite
Oh
emotional
God.
about that. I actually managed to watch the next episode after that. I've never gone past the quarterback,
That was the last
and I've
episode I
managed
ever watched of Glee.
that's yeah, and I've managed to get my emotions somewhat together and watch the next episode. So I'm kind of like I'm proud. Um, but yeah, he's in this, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. And his Welsh accent is not like he's got a British accent and well English, British.
Mhm.
It's like he's got an English accent, and I'm just like, please let it drop. Let me hear the Welsh. And like the first thing that I ever saw him in was, and I am so sorry for Welsh speakers out there. I'm about to butcher your language. If I get it correctly, it's a miracle. Yeah, there's the Welsh drama soap Poboli Quim, and that's where I first saw him in.
I have a friend.
Mm.
I have a friend from Wales who talks about Pebbly Quim before. Pebbly Quim. Oh God, that sounds like a double entendre.
Yeah,
Pebbly Quim.
well, I watching that, I started to learn a bit of what because the way that I learn languages is by just immersing myself in the language, just watching it, and I just sort of pick it up, and then with subtitles, I kind of translate it. apparently it's a weird way of learning languages. I'm like, is it? I don't know. Um, and the only thing that I do remember from watching this this soap is Pinglipop, which is microwave. That's basically that, and Borada is the only watch that I remember from like 20 odd years ago. I started watching it in
Slang
1999.
for micro.
So
It's a slang for microwave. It's not actually the
slang.
word for microwave.
It's not. Right. Well, I've just learned something new after like 20 odd years. But yeah, like I was really proud of that.
It's like all the works of Ken Loach as well. If a narrative doesn't fit into this kind of restrictive box, then it's kind of labeled as being an indie film, or it doesn't get as much exposure. But it's because a lot of executives are kind of frightened of pushing the envelope with new narratives with kind of minority characters. Like I remember watching Fish Tank back at uni as well, which I really enjoyed, which was a working class story from
Oh my god, that film! Yeah,
council
that
estates.
was something. I still don't know what to make of that film because that's got Michael Fassbender in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still processing that.
So, it's
very,
always been
so English. That's such an English film.
It's always been a belief of mine. It's really important for people to see people like them from their walk of life represented on screen, because it's like I'll never forget the first time I ever heard a whole accent on the TV, and I know this sounds really trivial, but the first time I ever heard a whole accent on TV was when Lucy Beaumont presented a program during the City of Culture year, and I felt really good about it because I'd heard someone who sounds like me on the TV.
Yeah.
It then kind of validated my kind of culture, even though being from Hull isn't particularly a culture. It's just nice to hear an accent, and I think that's the same of all walks of life. Once you've seen and heard someone who looks and sounds like you on the TV, you suddenly feel validated in being yourself.
It's that thing of, oh my god, people know that like my people exist.
Yeah.
Kind
Exactly,
of thing.
and it kind of goes from that low level thing of hearing someone with the same accent to going to seeing queer characters represented on television and more black characters and everything like that.
Yeah, it's like people of color, different like abilities, disabilities, cultures. There's just so many different shades of, oh my god, that's somebody like me, and you know it comes in different shades and strengths, and instead it's yeah, I personally would like to see a lot more variety, just because that's what I see in my own life.
Well, it's not
and I
just
want that reflected.
It's not just that, but it makes the films we watch on the television we watch more interesting to see different things rather than having to watch the same story, the same straight white people every week.
It gets air freshener vanilla.
Yeah, we want it. It adds color and it adds variety to and tells different stories. Like how big a breath of fresh air that Jordan Peele has seemed. It's like black filmmakers have been making films like that or similar to that for years, but they just haven't had the platform for it to be seen by a mass audience like Jordan Peele had.
Yeah. It's just, we need more of it.
Yeah, we do.
And it's just, again, with that othering of, oh, but people aren't going to want to watch it. It's just like, people aren't going to want to watch it if you keep saying people aren't going to watch it.
And more to the point, people aren't going to watch it if it's not available to watch.
Yeah.
If you don't provide it, then people can't see it. They can't know that they want it. It's like some of my favourite films have been watching about different cultures, different experiences. Like, my favourite film of all time is The Godfather, which is of course steeped in Sicilian family values and things like that. And it's really interesting to me to see these different, obviously always not from a positive standpoint because they're all mafioso or whatever, but it was just different to watch a different culture represented on screen.
Yeah.
And I really like the works of Jordan Peele because it's watching different stories that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, and even with like Italian culture, The Godfather, with that being predominantly Sicilian,
Mm-hmm.
like my family's Northern Italian, and yeah, there's this saying that it's not exactly the best saying either, but whenever I visited like my dad's and my nonna, that it kind of got thrown around a little bit whenever the South got mentioned, and it was usually basically the saying is Italy stops at Rome,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, oh my god, just
It's the kind of it's kind of refreshing to hear that the North-South divide isn't just exclusively an
yeah,
English thing.
yeah, it seems to be a bit of a common thing in a lot of countries.
But
Uh,
it's not just mafia stories that Italian culture says. It's got a rich
yeah,
history of westerns as well, of course, with Sergio Leone, and of course it goes mentioning that we lost Ennio Morricone yesterday,
yeah,
the
yeah,
composer behind the scores to most of Sergio Leone's films and The Hateful Eight, one of Quentin Tarantino's films, as
mm,
well. So that's
doesn't
of
he?
course linking to the Italian connection because of course Ennio
Mm,
was Italian,
yeah,
as was Sergio Leone in the films that he made with Clint Eastwood and what have you.
yeah. It's like you can like with the Italian, oh my goodness, phrasing. There is quite a difference with westerns. Like you can see the ones that are like the spaghetti westerns, the one that were made, in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
um, in Chita, and then you can see the difference with the westerns that were predominantly in, is it Nevada? I think it was
Yeah,
filmed
I
in
want to say
Nevada.
yes.
Yeah, the ones that are filmed in Hollywood or
Uh-huh.
in America, you can see that there is a difference in the style and the storytelling and just the general feel of them.
I kind of want to say that the Italian ones are more interesting as well.
I
As
mean, I'm kind of a bit biased, so yeah, I'll agree with that.
I've kind of have never been able to see the appeal of John Wayne, to be honest, because I kind of, and this the following sentence is going to sound blasphemous to a lot of people, but I kind of equate John Wayne with being a kind of 60s and 70s Vin Diesel, in that he's made a multiple decade career out of playing himself repeatedly.
It's essentially the same character, just different name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and once
it's
Genghis Khan for some reason.
because whitewashing. That's call it what it is. Whitewashing. Like, oh no, I remember having well, I was heading towards having an argument with a lecturer in my first year, because yeah, we were looking at social problem films in the 40s,
Mhm.
and we were looking at Pinky as well as Gentleman's Agreement, and the lecturer mentioned about how Hollywood didn't have a lot of people of color actors or actors of color, and I was just like, yeah, because they didn't want them. They were being racist. She's like, oh, but like if they came forward, like you couldn't exactly have like a black actor in like a white face. And she's like, white passing actors existed back then. Like they were available, they just didn't want to cast them because ultimately they're black, they're white passing, they're still black. They're not going to be accepting of them. It's like, and if the actors that were white passing came forward as well, actually I am of African descent, their careers could be like destroyed because of institutionalized racism. And he just wasn't quite on board with all of that, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna drop this because I'm sick. I had like a chest infection at the time. I'm just like, I'm dropping it, whatever, just it's in the sources you've provided, but whatever, go off on one.
And it kind of still remains the case today that the actors
Yeah.
are there, they're just sometimes not used when they could be.
Mm. It's like it's the thing of like there's the opportunity, people just don't want to take up on that opportunity. Instead, they'll just other.
So that's our kind of discussion on a Korean film that went off on multiple tangents. The all of the films that we mentioned are available to purchase on your usual streaming places wherever you buy your films. You can get them on Blu-ray as well. I've got most of them on Blu-ray. I've as for what else I've been up to during this month when the cinemas have been shut and I've had nothing to do but sit at home and watch movies, I haven't actually done all that much watching movies because, as it turns out, it's really hard to motivate yourself when you've got nothing to do. But I have reviewed a few. I started a new recurring article last week. I'm having a look at the history and evolution of animation over on my website, which is I started off with the early years, and I've just brought the narrative up to Walt Disney. So that's really interesting to see how animation was used as propaganda even in the 1910s.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure whether you'd have done the same module I did at uni, but the American Animation History module.
Yeah.
But essentially, there's a short film called The Sinking of the Lusitania, which is from 1918, I want to say, but it could be 1919, which was essentially a piece of war propaganda for the First World War, because the sinking of the Lusitania was the event that eventually led to America joining the First World War. And it's interesting to look at that and the parallels between the propaganda work that Disney did for the US Army in the Second World War, and that animation had always been used for propaganda and could have always been used for that case.
Yeah. I remember we looked at was it Snafu? Commander Snafu?
Private Snafu, yeah.
Private Snafu, yeah.
Which stands for Situation Normal, All Fucked Up.
Yeah. Which isn't that relevant now.
No. But it was relevant then.
No, I mean, like, everything, like, the situation's normal, not, like, we're currently living through a snafu right now.
Yeah. I think it's significantly more than a snafu, but...
Yeah. I mean, with us attempting ease lockdown, it's like, situation normal. It's like, it's not normal. Please stay home. As somebody with a weakened immune system, please, I beg you, stay home. Like... To get political, just to get political, like, our government can be following other governments across the world and actually, taking accountability for what's happening. I mean, there's, I can't remember who it was, but there's somebody that's essentially trying to bail out theatres at the moment, not bail them out.
Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor.
Yeah, he's just trying to save what's left of the theatre industry, and that should be down to the government. That's what we're paying taxes for.
Oh, are you talking about the guy from the government who announced the rescue package?
There is that. That. Personally, I think that's come quite a few months too late. And it's just when everything was happening, it's like the rich multi-billion companies were getting bailed out. I mean, they're multi-billion companies. They've got the money to bail themselves out. And the companies that do actually need help, like your local independent shops, they're the ones that are left to dry.
Well, if you follow the paper trail, you'll find that the reason they got bailed out is because most of them are donors to the Tory party.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, but we're getting very far off topic here. So I'm going to bring us back round to animation, because I introduced my boyfriend to The Three Little Pigs, the Disney short film from 1933, which is so utterly charming. I think that's probably one of the best things I found about having Disney Plus is watching some of the old shorts and just being completely charmed by it, even though some of them are nearly 100 years old. They still bring a smile to my face. But one of the things is that, of course, some of them are cut down for reasons of sensitivity, especially the Three Little Pigs, which has a a scene of a kind of the wolf dressed up as a peddler, but he's dressed as a really stereotypical Jewish peddler.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of anti-Semitism in Disney, which is quite interesting.
It's
It's
actually a fairly complex topic.
Yeah.
To be completely fair, there are a few employees who used to work for Walt Disney who are Jewish who said that he couldn't have been further from anti-Semitic at all. But then, of course, there is the odd reference and things like that. As I say, it's not a
It's
cut
very
and dry
complex.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah. I chose interesting instead of complex. It's because wasn't Disney supposed to be of Jewish descent as well? Didn't he have Jewish heritage?
I'm not sure.
Or is that like
that,
a rumored thing?
Because
I haven't done enough research into that.
My next animation history post is going to be about Disney, so I'll be doing some research into him soon. But speaking of the Disney Plus, I also reviewed Hamilton. That I published that yesterday.
Oh yeah, I watched Hamilton and I also watched Frozen 2.
I watched Frozen. I saw Frozen 2 in cinemas last year, but I really like it. But I really like the first Frozen. I just think it was completely overexposed.
Whereas, can I give a very controversial opinion?
Yeah.
I don't get the hype behind Hamilton. Like the music I like the music, but the choice of storytelling in Hamilton, I don't understand the hype.
I'm pretty much the exact opposite in that I saw it on the West End, and I think it's the best thing I've ever seen in a theatre. It's absolutely wonderful. It's the choreography is stunning. The music is cutting, and it's a revolutionary show about a revolution. Strangely enough, because of how different and new it seems.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with like the choreography and the music. It's just the form of storytelling. I was a bit like, I don't get the hype. Like I get the hype
like a history lesson. It's a history lesson within a musical.
It is, and I didn't.
It's a selective history lesson. But...
It kind of felt like history in bullet points, but set to really awesome music.
Yeah, and
like
of course
the way that the lyrics over were.
Sections as well.
Yeah, it's like the music and the lyrics. Yeah, like the music definitely. The lyrics were just like, okay, so this is what happened through history, and then the theatre kind of happened afterwards, kind of thing.
I really like the
I feel really awful, but it's like it's no Les Miserables. Like that's not a fair comparison. I mean, they're both revolutions, but I feel like I'm being really mean and harsh. But like,
I really like the choice of colorblind casting for it as well. That's something that I really like about it, because it adds a bit of variety, and it kind of I see it as a show. I see it as a choice to show what America could be, like in terms of multiculturalism.
Yeah, because like as far as I'm aware of, like they cast on talent, which definitely should be, the forefront. And then, it was just for me the storytelling of it wasn't what I prefer. So I'm just like, I was expecting everything to be really amazing and like absolutely everything fantastical. And I'm like, parts of it felt a bit like horrible histories, not horrible histories. The rap battles that's on YouTube. I can't remember what it's called, but unless it is actually just rap battles. But there's the historical rap battles on YouTube, and it kind of felt a bit like that at times.
There's a musical out next year as well. which is about a Latin American neighborhood.
Mm.
Which is very much, I think, written about some of his experiences. I think. Which
Oh.
the story of Hamilton probably caught his eye because Hamilton was a Caribbean immigrant, just like Lin-Manuel Miranda is, because he's from Puerto Rico. I'm not sure where Alexander Hamilton was from. It's somewhere in the Caribbean, as the Americans put it. But I reviewed that. The review of that was put up yesterday. I'd also I'm doing Train Spotting this week, which is a Scottish film from the 90s. Have you ever watched Train Spotting?
I haven't, no. It's one of those classics where it's just like, I need to watch it, but I just never get round to it. I always opt for something else. And
Well,
it's just, I'm not proud of that. I should have watched it by now.
I'm going to watch the first and the second one back to back. It was recommended to me by a friend and follower of my website, Ian. So I'll just give a shout out to Ian Judson for recommending that and many other films. He's kept me busy over the last couple of months by constantly adding films to my list to review, which I will get round to before the cinemas open again. And I'm between writing about animation and other things. Have you been up to much over the past month? Anything interesting?
Just K-dramas predominantly. It's just
I think
Netflix and Disney Plus. Like the amount of times that I've watched something that's in the Lilo and Stitch universe.
that reminds me actually that Spike Lee's new film's on Netflix. I should get onto that.
Ooh.
It's The Five Bloods, which sounds really strange when a white man says it, but it's spelt "da" as in D-A, The Five Bloods.
Yeah.
So it's a story of black soldiers in the Second World War, I believe. So very much a Spike Lee film.
Yeah.
I really liked Black Klansman, so I'm looking forward to seeing The Five Bloods, which just sounds worse the more I say it. Probably sounds a lot cooler when Spike Lee says it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
There is no way of saying that as a white English person and not sounding embarrassing.
Whereas if I say it, I just feel like I just sound more Dutch.
The Five Bloods.
Yeah, The Five Bloods.
Are there any?
Yeah, I just feel like this is a bit of a Dutch thing right there.
Are there any really interesting Dutch films you can think of?
Not that this is the thing that's like really irritating me and has for like the past 20 odd years. I can't seem to find any Dutch films. And if I do, they're the very mediocre films.
I've seen
the ones that just aren't worth
I've
watching.
seen a few films about one Dutchman in particular. I think I've seen about 3 different films about Vincent van Gogh.
Sorry, it's just that moment of just like, oh, I'm expecting you to say Vincent's name. Is it just, yeah, because that's, for those that don't know, I'm very, like, Vincent's my baby. Like, I love him so
There's
much.
also,
and like, it's a Van Gogh. And there's that meme, like, Van Gogh, Van Gogh, Van Gogh. And it's just like, no, it's Gogh.
There's a really interesting anecdote that me and Angel we were filming a student film in our, I think it was our first year, where we were talking about Vincent van Gogh, and I pronounced it like that because that's how I know to pronounce it, and Angel's told me before. And this girl on our course went, Don't you mean Vincent van Gogh?" And we were like, "No, it's Van Gogh." And she went, "No, it's Van Gogh." And Angel with a dead straight face goes, "I'm Dutch. I know how it's pronounced."
Yeah, I was. Oh, it's that thing of like when a non-Dutch person tries to tell a Dutch person how to pronounce a Dutch name, and I'm just like, I'm Dutch. He's Dutch. It's Gogh. You're mispronouncing it in the French way. Just no. I'm just like, I'm very overprotective of Vincent, even though I don't have much right to be, and it's just, I just believe that there's a lot of respect in a person's name, and if you mispronounce it and if you do it deliberately, it's just it's a form of disrespect.
This is
So
something
I'm
that
Polish.
that I'd seen on Facebook as well. Not Facebook, Twitter. Sorry, that caught my eye. It's stories of people with foreign names who come to England and give themselves anglicised names to make life easier for themselves.
I it
Which
doesn't
really
it doesn't
breaks my heart in a lot of ways, to be honest.
It's exhausting. I had that this morning. I had a few phone calls and not a single person. No, sorry, correction. I had one call out of, I think it was five I had today. One person got my name right, and that's because she was my physiotherapist from like a few years ago, so she remembered me, and she was just like, "Oh, hang on, wait, I said your name wrong," and she corrected herself, and I'm like, "See, this is why you were my favorite physiotherapist. You try."
And it's like when I was like trying to pronounce the Korean names earlier. It's
Yeah.
I've I probably murdered them and said them completely wrong, but I've tried. Like the one of the actors in Train to Busan, Ma Dong Seok, he has a westernized name, Don Lee, that he uses for his western productions. But I just think it's very disrespectful to expect people to change their name, their identity, because
Yeah.
you can't be bothered to learn how to say it.
Because there's so much importance in a person's name. There's a lot of history and there's a lot of like cultural context as well. Because like with me transitioning, when I chose like Angel's my middle name, and I go by Angel because it's just easier for everyone all around. My first name, it's very important to me. There's a lot of significance to it, and like I'm not very willing to just give it out to people because it's something special to me and for me. It is my name. I chose it. There's meaning behind it, and there's certain. It's Italian, and there's like certain sort of Italian cultural context to it. And I feel really weird as a white person being like, there's cultural context to it, but like each country does have its own cultural things. But certain countries' cultures, certain continents' culture just gets ripped apart and abused. And I do feel like we need to be more respectful and mindful and compassionate with different cultures.
Would you
Because
be
if
comfortable
I,
with me saying your first name on the podcast? Because I was going to try and pronounce it how I think it's pronounced.
you know what, go for it.
Luciana?
No,
No.
it's Luciani.
Luciani. Okay.
Yeah, Luciana is feminine.
Right.
So Luciano is the masculine, Luciani is sort of the neutral. It's
Sure.
technically plural, but like it is and it isn't. But yeah, it's derived from Luci, which is light.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. But I have been called Lucia. Well, sorry, Luciana all day, and I'm just like so close, but just there's an I at the end. Just it's not an A, it's an I.
Well, this is something for me as well because I could have sworn there was an A at the end because I have kind of very slight dyslexia, and it only kind of comes into effect at really strange times. It's like I was telling someone the other day when The Force Awakens was first released, I spent like 6 months calling the main villain Rilo Klen and not Kylo Ren because I'd seen it written down and I thought it said Rilo Klen
Mm.
and not the right way as it was.
Yeah, yeah, that's I finally caught up with that. I just that's something in and of itself. My God, what even was those films?
I still
But yeah,
enjoy them. I like them.
I mean, I enjoyed them for like mindless entertainment, and I finally understand the means that John Boyega like tweeted about Hollywood and romances. Because when I saw them, I was just like, I feel like this is a spoiler, but like, what? And now I get it. I totally get it. And of course, he's right. He's so right. And I just, what was that about?
I also think that
What was that about? What? Just no. I'm getting. Ooh, maybe we
so
should have that conversation privately because I
yeah.
don't get it.
Here's my controversial opinion alarm. I actually think The Last Jedi is one of the best Star Wars films.
I mean, all in all, it's a good film. There's just this one particular scene where I'm just like, what?
Is it where Finn kisses Rose?
Okay, yeah, sorry, two, because what was that about? Like that
Whatever
just
happened to Fopin
that
or
just
Pin
right.
Finpo? I wanted that to be a thing. That should
I
have been a
shipped
thing.
that so hard. I was just like, the way that they actually filmed that with the music and then like the soft focus and the way that they looked at each other, the way that it was edited, especially like when they like get reunited and there's like the petals. Like I remember there being petals. It was so like K-drama romance. I
Like,
I need to introduce you to like
I
K.
was really hoping in the last film, because it
Mhm.
looked for like a certain part of the film that they were going to try and make Finn and Rey love interests, and I was thinking, no, this just doesn't compute at all. They don't need to be love interests.
See, that angle, like the throughout like the last film, when it was like I basically mentally I was just like, oh look at Rey and her space husbands. I referred to Poe and Finn as her space husbands because it was just that, but not from like a sexual point of view, but like that platonic friendship that you have,
Yeah,
where it's just like, these are my husbands, they're my best friends, like they're the people that are my family and I love them to death like they were my own husband kind of thing. Like
there are
not
so few
romantic
films
or
that
sexual.
There are so few films that focus on friendship as opposed to relationships. And I think that's such
Yeah,
an underserved niche that sometimes characters can just be friends.
yeah.
Not every film needs a shoehorned romance, which I think is a message I need to shout from the rooftops at most Hollywood executives. Not
There's
every film needs a romance.
As
That's
an
something.
asexual, I completely and utterly agree with that because like not everything has to be about sex.
Leave your romance out of my Star Wars.
Yeah, I was just like, especially when it's as like, oh my god, like the whole it's been out for years. Like the whole thing between like Kylo and Rey and that scene, I was just like, what? What was that even about? Like, what was that about? I still don't get it.
You see,
What was that for? How did that serve the plot in any way, shape, or form? How did that move the story forward? Because it could just genuinely be a person just like being like, you're better than this, you can be better, instead of you can be better than this. You know what? Because I'm a woman, love will save the man. I'm sick of that narrative of
I
a woman
think
can save a man.
I
Just
think there's potential in us talking about Star Wars at a future date, but I
yeah,
think there can be multiple explanations for that. Like, for
mm.
instance, it could be a transference of force energy, or something along those lines.
Yeah, but
'Cause
they could have done it a different way than kissing. Like this is where I'm just like Spock. Spock had it right. Just
except in the reboots where he had a romance with I can't remember her name now. Uhura. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah. What was that about as well? Why did we need that?
because sex sells. Even though we have an entire cack, that was basically his entire existence to just be promiscuous. I don't think I pronounced that right, but like that's what cack is for. That's what he does. Literally, he does people. That's how the plot gets driven. But like Spock and Uhura, I don't
To
fully
be
grasp
to be
that.
fair to the Rain Kylo aspect, I think it
Mm.
has been something they've been hinting at the entire trilogy, although there's been overtones of some kind of relationship there. But that doesn't mean that they had
So
to do it.
abusive and violent and aggressive and just very, very unhealthy person to want to be with. I don't understand why somebody would want to actually be in a relationship with somebody who is genocidal.
Because I think it's viewed on different terms in a science fiction way, as a Jedi Sith way, that there was still a little bit of light side in him that was obvious throughout all of the films, and I think that's the focus as opposed to character traits that we associate with humans. We're dealing with kind of sci-fi space wizards, so dealing with kind of human ideals in a lot of ways, which is the same way as to why Darth Vader turning at the end of Return of the Jedi, even though we've now seen him do all kinds of horrendous stuff in the prequels, it still has an effect because of that light side, dark side narrative point.
Mm. Mm.
Getting back to the cinemas.
Yeah, I'm just like, yeah, that's just. I disagree, and I don't want this to turn into an argument.
And to be fair, we are already running at 1 3/4 hours.
And I could run for so many more hours just about that scene. Anyways, moving swiftly on.
So, cinema's supposed to be opening again next month, or later this month, or whenever they decide to open, which would have been a potential problem if they had stuck with the 10th of July, because the problem was bugger all's coming out. But as it happens, they're going to be reopening with 10A, which is good. I'm looking forward to that. Although I would much rather wait longer until everyone can see it, and wait longer until theatres can be opened completely.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not particularly comfortable with the idea of going back to a cinema. Just like, I don't really want to go to a theatre at the moment. I don't want to go to a... But I think with the film industry being a massive money juggernaut that it is, it couldn't kind of sit on its hands for as long as probably needed. Sadly.
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, I think there's ways of trying to sort of move on with things, because I think, you know, with lockdown easing, with my immune system being the way that it is, it's, for somebody like me, it's dangerous as it is. There's people that are actually immune compromised, and it will literally kill them. It's just, it's too much too soon. I think we still need to find ways of coping with avoiding people, basically.
The thing cinemas,
yeah, I think with cinemas, at least doing online streamings, moving online, it could be a solution.
There's moving new films online, that's a bridge that you can't go back on, because once they start moving new films online, and if it becomes as big a success as it would have been in the cinema, then all of a sudden your cinemas become obsolete entirely, because once they've been shown a way that, because don't forget that releasing films on streaming means that a whole lot more of the profits go back to the studios that made them, because a cinema keeps X amount of each ticket, whereas when you release a film online, you get pretty much all of the profits. But there's also that's a bridge that you can't go back on.
I think that's a bit of a black or white kind of viewing on it, because there's a lot of things that you get from going to a cinema, and you know, it's kind of like saying, oh, having CDs, you know, we're not going to have concerts. There's a lot that you experience in a cinema, like viewing something on a big screen with your friends. You know, the whole thing of like meeting your friends at the cinema. There's like the merchandise that you can get at cinemas. It's an entire experience. So to say that there's no going back, I think that's kind of, I mean, because we've got CDs now and like we can stream things, people are still wanting to go see live events. People are still wanting to go and do things in person. So I think it's not as black and white. I do really want to go back to the cinemas, but for the time being, I'll stream.
I think
because
the
that's
the
what's
difference
successful to me.
the
One of the
difference that
reasons that I don't go to cinema as often as I would like to is because they're not accessible.
I think the difference there is most people who are watching films at home already have pretty big screens to view it on, and the difference between watching a film at cinema and live music is watching the music perform live is a different experience. Whereas when you're
Sure.
watching a film, you're watching the same thing whether you're watching it on the cinema screen or on a TV screen. Plus, it's a whole lot cheaper to watch it at home, especially if you're going in for buying popcorn and drinks. It's a whole lot cheaper to bring them in and
But
watch it at
then,
home.
by that logic, cinemas would have been obsolete anyways, because
But
people would stop going to cinemas and just be like, "I'll wait until Netflix," or "I'll
well,
wait until it's
no,
on Prime."
but
People
because
do that, but
because the difference is cinemas have the film first as it stands now. So that's why cinemas aren't obsolete, because they're kind of the gatekeepers of the content that people want. Because if something is available, people aren't going to wait 6 months until it's on Netflix. They'll want to watch it there and then. And that is why cinema is still alive now, even when most of things are heading online. It's because they get the product first, so they get the attention of the masses first.
but with how Netflix is going with its original films, it's bypassing the cinemas completely. So
Yeah,
it's kind of,
but
it's just two sides of the same coin. I don't think that if things move online for the time being, that it's just gonna stop cinemas from existing completely. I think it's just one of those things of, if we make it clear it's a temporary measure.
I think the difference, as well as to releasing a film on a platform like Netflix, is you never get a black and white knowledge of what the box office gross is, because people don't pay for the film on Netflix, they pay for the subscription. You
Yeah,
don't know how much percent goes to each film. So which is why executives prefer it to go to cinema, because then they
yeah,
know the bottom line of what every film's earned,
yeah. Because you can
essentially.
only go so far with streaming numbers.
Yeah,
It's
and
not always that
not
accurate.
not to mention how expensive films are to make, then
Mm.
executives are going to want to know that they're going to get a return on their investment in black and white, which is
Mm.
why cinemas still hold influence. But if each if each studio were to move all of its distribution online through either their own streaming service or a deal with someone else's, then
Mm.
that would be the kind of the beginning of the end for the cinema, I think.
I don't think it'll be the beginning of the end. I think that's a bit exaggerated. But that's from my point of view of, like, because I do love cinema, but like from my
Yeah,
own personal experience, it's like, if it was more accessible to me, I would actually be going to cinema more often, because it doesn't have subtitles, and I'm a person that needs subtitles. They're closing themselves off for people like me. They could do with more sort of autism friendly screenings, but they're closing themselves off from those customers. If they're gonna claim that this is going to be the death of cinema, they're basically putting themselves in the coffin.
yeah. I suppose there's a way to look at it from either side.
Yeah,
To be fair,
yeah, yeah.
they
It's just the
I
way that
mean,
I see it, it's like it's two sides of the same coin,
I'm
but it's just
I'm
what
obviously
you're gonna
of
do
the
with the coin.
mindset that I want the cinemas to succeed,
Yeah,
because to me the best experience of watching a film is in the cinema, and
exactly.
I don't go for I don't believe that cinema is a social thing. I think cinemas are best enjoyed on your own, but that's just my own personal opinion, because I mainly don't like other people. So the but as technology gets better and better, and
Mm.
home entertainment systems get better and better, is where the cinemas have to really change the game to stay ahead of the curve. Because the bigger home entertainment systems get, the more obsolete it makes the cinema look.
But then you've still got things like the IMAX theaters, where the seats move and you get like the scents and the whole
That's just a
sprays and
gimmick, though, isn't
everything.
it? That's
But
it's the
can you get
same
that at
as
home?
when
Can you get
well,
that gimmick at home?
well, a similar thing happened when 3D first came in, and that's That's available in homes now, so I can only see it as a matter of time before it's somehow made available at home. It's gimmicks are never the future. They're never the solution. They're a band-aid over a shotgun wound. You know, the only thing that guarantees success and guarantees money is a good product, well made, which is what I've always said.
But then, how do you know whether a gimmick is an actual gimmick or one of these like innovations if you don't just try it out first?
You know, it's
trial
a
and
gimmick.
error.
Yeah, it is trial and error, but there's also
sometimes you just know.
Just put on it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes
you just look at a thing and it's like, this isn't going to last.
Especially with 3D, because we've essentially been trying 3D films for the past 100 years.
Keep trying.
So, and it doesn't improve immersion. It just gives you a headache.
Yeah. It's not accessible to anyone. It's like we keep trying and it's just like, yeah, this
is one of the things that annoys me about filmmakers like James Cameron, who just focuses on technology and special effects, which don't make a film good. A good story and characters make a film good, not the effects. Like, I mean, how many big films, like let's take your superhero films, let's take Endgame and Infinity War for instance. True, it's a good film, but it's not considered amongst the pantheon of cinema classics, is it?
No, it was just too. Oh, it was too much. Too big, too flashy, and just like the only thing about Infinity Wars that like, is it even Infinity Wars? I'm not even sure whether it is Infinity Wars. Let me think. Or was it Endgame? Which one is it where Peter Parker is basically like, I don't feel so well, Mr. Stark.
That's Infinity War.
Like, I don't even know whether it's Endgame or Infinity War because like they all just blur into one. Like, I have that issue already, but like, this is Marvel. You're supposed to be able to be like, oh yeah, actually, I remember this is from that film. And it's just like, no, the only thing that I remember about the film is just Peter just vanishing and just being like, that kid deserved better. I was heartbroken over that.
The moment you're can look good in the moment, you remember characters and story moments more.
I think because there's that like emotional response.
Yeah, and you can't get an emotional response from a computer program. Which I wish someone told George Lucas in around 1998, but you know.
I mean, the way that I feel for BB-8, I love BB-8 so much.
Yeah, but he was practical. He was practical. He was a puppet. He wasn't a special effect. He was actually there.
Ah, right, that's what you mean. Okay, because I was just like, well, technically, like, BB-8's a computer, and I really like BB-8. But yeah, for special effects, I think that's why Jurassic Park works so well. Even now, when we rewatch like Jurassic Park, it's still a classic, is because of the animatronics that we used.
Yeah.
Because it's physically there. It's
practical effects that are actually there will always look more lifelike because they are lifelike. They're there. Like if you
like that crystal.
In the Star Wars prequels, there wasn't a single clone trooper that was real. They were all CGI.
Yeah.
Which just you can kind of tell because how they all look the same. They all look like they're made in a computer program. Especially when one of them's got their helmet off because it just looks like a floating head on top of a computer generated image, which is essentially what it is. So.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I've been rewatching Glee, and there's one episode in, I don't even remember because it's just like it's a marathon now. But yeah, there's one episode where in the audience they actually use like mannequins and dummies, and I kind of paused it, and I needed to get a glass of water or something, and I paused it. And I was like, that head does not look. Oh, that isn't real. That isn't real. They actually used dummies, but I think if I hadn't paused it at that awkward moment, I wouldn't have realized. And then somebody on Twitter was just like, "Oh, hey, I've been watching this episode." It's like, I'm watching that episode right now, and they noticed the dummy, and it was just awkward. But while you're actually watching it, it does look real. But then when you look closer, it's just like, oh wait, no, that's not an actual person. It's a dummy instead of it's CGI. When it's CGI, there's that. Is it the uncanny valley where you just know it's not real?
The closer you can get to simulating real faces, the less real it looks.
Yeah. Whereas I think with
I'm gonna have to bring us around to a conclusion, because otherwise this is just going to be 2 hours of people randomly rambling about different places. Which they're all great conversation topics, but I feel like they could all make a podcast in their own right. And we're just about to cross the 2 hour mark, and I think people will be starting to lose patience right about now. So I'm going to bring us screeching towards a halt and a conclusion here by plugging my website, where you'll be able to find this episode and all my reviews at majorfilmreviews.com. You can find me on Twitter at NathanKenMajor. And do you want to plug any of your stuff, Angel?
I don't currently have anything to plug other than just, enjoy K-dramas. Netflix has a nice selection. I highly recommend Itaewon Class. And if you've got a Viki subscription, then if not, get one. It's VIKI, and watch Goblin, the Great and Lonely King. That's got Gong Yoo in it, who was in Train to Busan.
Oh, really?
He plays kind of like a demigod. And I don't want to give too much away, but it's such a beautiful story, and the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. And I just love the actors. Everything about it is absolutely brilliant. So if you can, get a Viki subscription, go watch that.
And I'll remind all the listeners that all of the films that we've talked about are available through your usual streaming devices, or available on DVD and Blu-ray from your preferred retail outlet of choice. A recommendation from me, seeing as Angel made one, I recommend Hamilton on Disney Plus, of course. Also recommend Frozen 2 if you haven't seen that one and you're a fan of the first one. And of course, I recommend Parasite and Mother, both of which are available to stream and to buy on Blu-ray and DVD. Thank you for listening to this rather confusing in the end podcast, where we ended up talking about many different topics. We dallied with all sorts of different kind of fancies and talked about all kinds of different historical points. I hope it all interested you, and we'll be back to ramble again next month, I imagine. So thanks for joining me once again, Angel.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll talk to you again next month.
Bye.
Bye.